Hello. Today I'm going to teach you about a hand signal. It's a hand signal which is used in T group, but it's not only useful for T group. And there's a little bit of group dynamics theory that goes behind it, which is just very, very generally useful. So if you do T group, you're already going to know this hand signal. If you learned T group from my last video, you're going to want to know this hand signal. And if you don't do T group, but you are ever in a group of people, you want to know this hand signal. Okay, and you want to know especially the group dynamics theory that goes behind it. So that should cover everyone but religious hermits. If you're a religious hermit, you probably don't need this hand signal. So here's the hand signal. You ready? And I made a terrible mistake. So I made a video about the T group rules and the hand signals a little while ago, and this is the most important hand signal in T group. It's so important that I just didn't even think about it because it's so baked into, I don't know, how I think. We use it at work. Of my non-T group related job, we use the exact same hand signal to mean the exact same thing. It's just that useful. So without further ado, here is the hand signal. You ready? It's like that. You can also just do it with one hand. Most often people will just do it with one hand, like this. In T group land, people do it like this. At my work, they do it like this, hands up versus horizontal hands. I've seen it both ways. In the rationality community, they do it, and then there's another dimension, which I will get into in a bit. But what does it mean? Okay, what does this hand signal mean? This hand signal means I have a version of what you are saying. You could also say, I could say something similar right now. So how is this useful? So you're in a group of people and someone is expressing something, an idea, an emotion, anything. You as a participant in the group can do this and let them know and let the rest of the group know that you have some version of that same experience. And here's what's really important, and here's what makes this hand signal kind of game-changing and super useful, is you're doing it without distracting from the conversation, right? Like, without the hand signal, the only way you can do that is you've got two options. You can wait for them to finish, so they say, say this is a work thing even, right? This is not a two thing, but say someone says, I don't think we should start this project yet. I don't think we have the information we need, blah, blah, blah. Some kind of work opinion, right? You can either wait for them to finish and then say, I agree. Or you can kind of distract everybody by saying it while they're still talking. Yeah, me too. I think that's right. Both of the first one is there's like a delay, and then the second one is just distracting and annoying. So with the wiggle fingers, I don't really know what they're called. They're called wiggles, wigs. You can just do this, and everybody in the group knows that you agree, which itself has a bunch of different functions. So one, it lets the person speaking know that you have resonance with them, and it can also be a feeling, right? So it could be someone saying, "Wow, I'm feeling like this group is like really challenging, and I'm cautious about what to say next because I feel like I will step on some toes." And then like a couple other people do this. It lets you, the speaker, know you are not alone, right? It lets you, the speaker, know there are other people that hold the same position as you. That can just be relaxing to the nervous system. One of the things that we're unconsciously tracking all the time is, do I belong? Do I belong? Do I belong? Am I still going to belong in the group after I say this? Whenever you're sharing something, especially if you're sharing something that's maybe a little bit contentious, a little bit divisive, potentially divisive, immediately getting the feedback that there are other people in the group that feel the same way as you can just help relax your nervous system to keep speaking. And it makes you feel more connected. Like maybe you're just saying, wow, I've just felt so sad the last few days. And then a couple other people do this and you're like, we're no longer in work, right? You could be in work, but mostly this is in like more of an emotional processing group, like a T group. You do this and you say, I'm feeling so sad the last couple of days. Someone else does this and suddenly you feel less alone in that experience. So it's useful for the person who is speaking. It's useful if you're sat there and someone says something you agree with. There can be this feeling of like, ooh, like I want everyone to know that I agree with this. Like they just said something that I like, and it can be a little bit distracting. You can get stuck. Someone says something you agree with. You can get stuck in that thing that they said, and then you stop paying attention to what they're saying next, because you're kind of like in this like, ooh, I agree with that, and like I kind of want to signal boost it, and I want people to know, like it's kind of a little bit egoic, not in a derogatory sense, but just like I want people to know this about me, that I also feel this way, or I also think this way. So this just lets you relieve yourself of that feeling. Like you can just let the group know, yep, I feel the same way. Someone says like, Parasite is the best movie of 2019, which is true. If someone says Parasite is the best movie of 2019, you can do this, and then you don't have to like hold on to anything. You can carry on with the flow of conversation. Now, in that case, that sounds like a complete statement. You might want to respond and be like, oh my God, yes, it is. Anyone that hasn't seen it should go out and see it right now. This video is not sponsored by Parasite. It's the best movie of 2019. You should go see it. So it's helpful for the ones who have the resonance, who have a version of whatever the speaker is saying, to be able to say, yep, me too. And then it's also helpful just for the whole group, for even people that don't feel that way. Like the difference between one person saying like, you know, I feel really careful in this group, and like I don't want to step on toes, and it feels kind of a little risky to even speak. If you are sat in the group and you're not having that experience, and one person says that, and there's 6 people in the group, one person says that, you kind of go, okay, you're having that experience. But if that person says that and 3 other people go, yep, suddenly you're like, oh, this is something that's kind of happening at a group level, which I'm not aware of. And then in that case, maybe like I'm the cause of it, right? If I feel totally safe and comfortable to speak, and everyone else is like, I feel really cautious, maybe I want to look at like, is there something I'm doing that's creating that? Maybe not, but it's really useful information. So it's useful information for all positions in the group in that moment. So I'm going to get into a little bit of the group dynamics theory behind this tool, which is part of what makes it so useful. And of all of the T-group hand signals, it is by far the most useful one. It's the only one that I've taken out of T-group and into the rest of my life. I wish everybody knew it, because I'll find myself in conversations where people don't know it, and I'll start to lift my hand to like do this, and I'll be like, wait, that's just going to look weird, given that we don't have context for it. So partly I'm making this video to teach more people in the world to use this hand signal. So I'm going to get in a minute into the group dynamics theory of it, but first, just a little bit like, well, I don't know, like, okay, I can do this in T-group because this is one of the rules of T-group and people do it all the time. But outside of that, how do I use it? So you just got to teach people. That's it. There's no special trick to this. But I would highly encourage you to teach, especially if you have nerdy, kind of authentic relating, group dynamic style friends who like to be intentional about communication in any way. Teach them this hand signal and just play with it and notice how incredibly useful it is. It's that useful. If you're part of a team at work and they're open to kind of experiments and trying new things, and they want to improve their communication, they want to be as efficient and effective as possible, this is also something you can introduce there. So yeah, I would just say to use it, you just got to use it, and you've got to teach people around you what you mean, because you can't just do it, because otherwise people won't necessarily know what you mean. Like when you're playing air piano, what's happening? A little bit of the group dynamics theory behind it. So there's an idea in group dynamics called distribution. The idea of distribution is, well, let's talk about the opposite of distribution first. So oftentimes, and I'm going to go to like a T group or a circling style group, a group which is about emotional processing. Could be a men's circle, could be a circling event, could be a T group, could be a meditation event, could be work, could be a meeting in work. One thing that can happen is someone expresses a feeling or an opinion, and the group's natural inclination is to focus more on that person. So again, say you're in a group, I'm going to keep using the same example. Say you're in a group and you don't have this tool, and somebody says, yeah, I feel really careful. Like I just feel like if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to step on someone's toes, or I'm going to upset someone. And so it feels like not actually comfortable for me to speak in this group. There can be a tendency for the whole group's attention to be like, oh God, right? The one thing that happens is everyone's like, thank God someone said something, right? Because sometimes in those kind of groups, it can just be like hanging out for a while. Someone said something, this feels true, it feels real, it feels like they're taking an emotional risk, it's vulnerable, so it's interesting. And the kind of the response default response is everyone pays more attention to that person. So the group focuses in on that person and starts saying, well, tell me more about this. What lets you know to feel unsafe? Is there a moment that really, like, where you first started noticing this? What is the feeling like in your body? What does this remind you of from your history? Like, any number of really cool, really interesting kind of coaching therapy style questions about what's going on for that person, what their experience is. Now, the problem with this is what that does is it identifies that person with that feeling, that experience, and they become kind of fixed in the mind of the group, like they have that experience. And something really interesting happens is that if there are other people having that experience in the group, but that's not being expressed, it actually amplifies the experience for the one who's getting the attention. So this is a little subtle, but I just want you to understand that if I say feels kind of like risky in this group, and then everyone's like, really risky, how? Suddenly I'm like the only one that's willing to have that experience in the eyes and ears of the group, and I start feeling it more. I start feeling even less safe, even more like cautious. Or it might be like I'm feeling bored, and everyone's like, huh, you're feeling bored, what's that about? And suddenly I'm like, yeah, this is boring, and no one else is kind of like is willing to own their version of that experience, and it amplifies it. So a different intervention you can make. So one kind of intervention, someone says something. One intervention a group can make is they all start paying more attention to the one that's. A completely different intervention is for the group to surface other people that have a version of the same experience. So that's what this is, right? And that's called distribution. Anytime where someone shares an experience and your response is to surface within the group other people who have a version of the same experience, that is distribution. So this is a tool for creating distribution. Another tool, if you're a facilitator or even just a member of the group, but especially if you're a facilitator and someone says, I'm feeling unsafe and feeling like it's dangerous to speak in this group and feeling like I'm going to step on people's toes, as a facilitator, you can say, does anyone else have a version of this experience, right? Like you can invite that same thing. Or as a member of the group, you can invite it, or you can just share it. You can say, hey, I have a version of that. Like I can find, it's not exactly, and that's what I love about that language, like I have a version of, right? It's not like I'm having the same experience as you, because like you don't know, that can kind of create some personality stuff where someone's like, no, you're not having the same experience as me, or you know, or it might be like, nah, I couldn't say that honestly. Like, I'm not having that experience, but I am having a version. Like, I don't feel unsafe, but I do notice that I feel cautious, right? It's kind of a version of the same experience without being the same experience. Or I don't feel bored, but I feel checked out, right? Not the same, kind of a version of the same. Another way you can do distribution, and this is once you started practicing with this and you start getting the felt experience of what it feels like when distribution is happening versus when it's not, and amplification is happening instead, and you start to internalize it and have an awareness of it. I notice that I do this a lot now in groups that are not trained in this way to understand and be tracking this, is I'll distribute myself. So like I was in a meditation group a few months ago, and that we were being asked to do something kind of weird and like kind of vulnerable, and I raised my hand and said, I noticed that I feel like self-conscious about I noticed that I feel self-conscious about this part of the practice. And the teacher was great, and she's an awesome meditation teacher, and she's like, got it, yeah, you feel self-conscious, that makes sense, like, yeah, which is a little bit of distribution even to say that makes sense. But I noticed that it wasn't really like relieving me of the feeling, like I was still kind of feeling it. And so I just kind of raised my hand and I was like, does anyone else, there's maybe 15 people in the room. I was like, does anyone else have a version of that? Is anyone else feeling self-conscious about doing this? Half the hands in the room went up. I immediately relaxed. I'm like, okay, like I'm not like some kind of weird outlier who's like being kind of extra shy when everyone else is like, no, it's great, I just do it. You're probably totally tantalized. It's not that interesting, but it's basically some movement practice that went with the meditation. So I eight more hands go up, and I'm like, okay, I'm not some weirdo, like other people are having this experience. And then another really interesting thing that started to happen is other people in the group then started sharing that, yeah, oh yeah, I have, and I've been doing this practice for years and I still feel really self-conscious, or like, yeah, no, it's kind of weird, isn't it? And then someone else saying, I used to feel self-conscious about it and I've done it, and this whole conversation erupted out of it. Suddenly it's normalized, it's part of the experience of the group, and it was a huge relief. So that's kind of an advanced version, is I was distributing myself. And you can do that too once you learn these distinctions, these practices. So that is what I'm going to say today about the WIGS hand gesture. I strongly recommend that you bring this into your group practices and potentially out to work, and potentially to any friends that you think would be open to using this kind of communication. It's really, really effective, useful tool, and there's also some of the group dynamics background behind it around distribution and amplification, and how valuable and counterintuitive it is to find other versions of the same experience within the group, rather than just focusing in on the one person who had the guts in that moment to express it. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and take care.